We have three games to review. Those should be interesting. And then also, I was interested in looking at basically some of the kind of general, basically some of the general concepts related to attacks on weak squares. There's a particular thing that I was interested in looking at, which is basically an assessment of what happens if you play bishop to h6 against the dragon or against a fianchettoed bishop. And yeah, basically it's interesting. The concept is so the concept comes up in a few different openings. It comes up frequently in the Sicilian Dragon. It can come up in the Modern, and it can come up in the Perk, where basically there's a queen on d2 and a bishop on e3, basically on the c1 to h6 diagonal, and the bishop plays from e3 to h6. And the question is, like, why do you do that, right? Is there a tactical reason why you do that, or is there, kind of another reason why you would move the same piece twice in the same opening? Are you trying to exchange the fianchettoed bishop? And yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, I wanted to take a look at a few Grandmaster level games that have this characteristic to them. This is one. This is from Tata Steel. And yeah, let's look. So basically G3, G6. This is kind of a standard opening Vienna game with G3 and G6. Bishop to G2, bishop to G7, D3. Hey, welcome, pretty boy. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Thanks for being here. So yeah, so basically what I wanted to do is look over for 45 minutes and take a look, bishop to C1 into H6, that kind of idea. And then, bishop to E3, queen to D2, it would be the supporting structure for that. But yeah, so F4, knight E7, knight F3, knight 2, D4, castles, bishop to G4, and basically, this is kind of a normal Vienna type game. White can play something like H3, white can play something like G4. There will be pressure on F7 potentially, but we'll see. The main piece of this game that I want to go to, and I'm sort of fast forwarding to it, is this move here. So why is white playing bishop to h6 here, right? I mean, we know that these are highest level players. These are both grandmasters playing in a very competitive grandmaster level tournament. So why is bishop to h6 an appealing move for white? It's an interesting question. I guess when I was preparing for this lesson, I was sort of thinking a little bit about this. This is a complicated type of move, right? It's basically, it's weird, right? If you're thinking about it, this bishop's, first thing, white isn't fully developed. So, a straightforward developing move like rook to f1 probably improves white's rook on the a file, right? So, worst case scenario, this slight improvement in development could probably be, played. Let's take a look at the engine eval. I was thinking, yeah, rook a f1, right? Is the kind of straightforward developing move that I was thinking of. But what's interesting is that bishop to h6 is playable here. So bishop to h6, and basically, you're trying to trade off, white's. You're spending a move, right? I mean, time is very valuable in chess. So you're spending a move, moving your bishop twice along this diagonal, playing to bishop to h6, and then, is your goal? What are the goals here, basically, from white's perspective? So the first and most superficial goal is this bishop is a fianchettoed bishop. This bishop is a non-fianchettoed bishop. Trading your non-fianchettoed bishop for the fianchettoed bishop should lead you to have a favorable trade, right? That's a trade that overall should be good for white. So yeah, so that bishop to h6 playing into f8. I think that's big. Here, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6. But it's not just about trading off this bishop, from f4 for the bishop on g7. One of the valuable things that this does is it creates, weak squares around the king, right? So if the bishop gets traded off, the queen gets traded off. Now we're seeing weaknesses basically all along this diagonal. You've already played e5 as black, and you've played g6. So the f6 square is one that could potentially provide white with opportunities. And the weak squares f6, g7, and h6. The combination of these, I think is pretty interesting. Basically, these could be potential outposts, potential places for white to attack, and white may be able to coordinate with them. Hey, Lauren. Hey, thank you very much for joining the stream. I actually think Lauren will have some great insights on this. This is kind of a very theoretical lesson. It's one that's pretty high level, probably on the upper level of the kind of things that I understand. But yeah, basically, why is queen to h6? Or why? The question is, how do you coordinate attacks along these dark squares in front of the king? And why does white play moves like bishop to h6 in a lot of in a lot of fianchettoed bishop openings? Is it just about trading off the bishop for the other bishop, or is it about or is it more about controlling the squares? And if white does this, is it worth playing a move like bishop to h8 in order to keep your bishop on the board? It's really understanding the full intricacy here. We know GM level stuff, right? We know GMs play this frequently, but why do they actually play this? It mostly has to do with the strength of the squares around the king. But I get the sense that Lauren's really into these kind of like classical positional understanding type things. So I'll probably not get a full again, this is sort of high level for me. So understanding the full positional intricacy of this is valuable. So what I'm saying is basically, the white has two options here. A rook to f1 provides a straightforward developing move. This is good for white. It's a very objectively good for white. You're aligning two rooks on the f file, both threatening on f7 and basically providing more strength on one of white's most active files in this game. So the other alternative move, bishop to h6, this bishop to h6 is bishop takes, queen takes, and now these squares around the king are weak, and you're able to basically place pieces around them. So I guess my question is, why is that bishop to h6 move more valuable than that straightforward developing move there? To me it seems like you're using a tempo to trade off a piece that was well placed for you versus a piece that was well placed for your opponent. I mean, this bishop was facing off on d6. So yeah, trading off the good bishop, right? Interesting. Yeah, no. So that's basically right. That's basically the conclusion that I came to. I think Lauren puts it in a very articulate way, but yeah, the first two is what I was focusing on. I guess before I did this lesson, my main thinking revolved around the idea of the first the first point. Basically, this is the type of thing that white does to either advance an attack, or actually, I had a third point on there. But yeah. So I was like, I've seen this done so many times in GM games, and I assumed that basically it was being done, for one of two reasons. It was either being done to attack, to increase an attack, usually with an open rook file, supporting the queen on h6. So like, with the h-pawn gone and the rook on h1 basically facing off on h6. And then for the second one, trading off the good bishop, or basically your bad squared bishop for black's good squared bishop. But I had not really, focused on those weak complex squares. So yeah, exactly what Lauren's talking about. I think Lauren gives like an A+ answer to this, and I guess I was thinking about that today. When I was preparing for this lesson. So I guess my understanding on this, when I think about it, was a little bit was sort of superficial. And in actually preparing for this, I got to think a lot, kind of a lot more. So yeah, the weak complex squares around a king. And the way that those might be attacked later in the game. I guess that in practice, I probably, executed a bit on that, but from a deeper positional understanding, I don't think I fully understood like the complexity of that until I actually bothered to study for this lesson. So again, Lauren gives an excellent answer, but yeah, attacking this, attacking the weak squares along this king. Yeah, right. I mean, but you can basically play moves like rook to f6 potentially, or knight to, basically you'll have better attacking chances on knight to f6, or you might be able to try tactics e5, knight to e4, threats on knight to f6, threats on knight to g5, and those ideas, I think that those are a good demonstration of kind of what what's valuable here about bishop to h6, bishop takes h6. So that's sort of what I was thinking of, and yeah, I think Lauren explains it very well. I knew that if I asked her, she would know, and yeah, so yeah, right. So it opens up the situation for tactical exploitation. But I guess I don't know. My understanding on this was pretty superficial. So actually getting to study this was super helpful, and now I can kind of go through it and demonstrate it a little better. But yeah, it's not just about trading off your bad squared bishop for black's good squared bishop. It's also about creating weak pawns around the king. I probably should have kind of inferred that, but yeah, it's good. It's good to get that reinforced for me especially. Anyways, this yeah, these basic plays, now White's gotta have a lot of so we can see in this game what happens. So here, basically, after bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, White then successfully uses these weak pawns around the king to exploit the situation. So threats on f6 are going to be big. This, basically this weak square on f6 is really important, and it's one that White basically generated with that bishop trade. And we can see basically White complete the attack here. So the queen plays to e8, knight to b1, and basically knight, you can play moves like e5, knight to e4, knight to f6, and basically get threats on h7 here. I think that's the long-term plan, and I think that's going to be a strong one for White. So let's see. Sure, yeah, we can take a look at that one. If we get time, I'm not sure how long I've got 2 games out of this, but yeah, we can take a look at that specific one, Lauren. But yeah, it's great. It's awesome to get. I always appreciate you participating, Lauren. It really contributes a lot to the stream. So yeah, we can take a look at that Grishik Giri game if we get an extra minute. Yeah, right. Yeah, so I mean, that's sort of what I was thinking. Like, you're trading off a strong fianchetted bishop, and basically you're trading off the strong fianchetted bishop, which is the good squared bishop for black, versus your weak squared bishop for white. Yeah, I mean, definitely characteristics of that too. But yeah, cool. Interesting. Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. It's really helpful. No, it's really helpful because I know that you have different strengths and understanding than I do. So it's actually really helpful. I knew I could ask you for advice on that one, and you'd give me an excellent answer. Anyways, knight to d2, knight takes, knight to f5, rook takes, and basically this yeah, no, I definitely think yeah, I mean, basically yes. No, it wouldn't surprise me. No, I think it's really helpful to have your input. So yeah, no, for sure. I ask knowing that you'll be able to add something very helpful. But yeah, so threats on f5, knight takes f5, bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, knight to f6. I think that's probably going to be the way that White exploits this. But really, this attack is just an excellent, an excellent opportunity to exploit the king side here. With knight to f5, knight takes f5, knight takes f5, rook takes. Basically, this f6 outpost, this f6 square, which had basically been defended by the bishop, but stopped being defended by the bishop after White forced the bishops off the board. This is huge in terms of the, the overall attack generation for White. So that's what happens here. Rook takes, queen to d4, and now White can play knight to g5, queen takes, bishop to c6. Overall here, White's just going to be way better. This is a great situation. Basically, White was ultimately able to exploit this tactically by trading off the 2 pieces for the or basically get the bishop for free here. So yeah, so the knight trades, the rook trades, and then the black can't retake here. Otherwise, you can't retake with the bishop. Otherwise, so this is the important part. Yeah, no. So this attack is really good at exploiting these this f6 and g5 squares. Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, so we can go through that again, but basically, yeah, this bishop forces off this bishop, and it's not just the trading of this strong bishop for that weaker bishop on f4. It's also this really strong generation of the the holding the square on f6, holding the square on g5, and attacks on h7. So that's really what this was about. Okay, b5, h3, bishop to e6, and basically White's squaring up this attack here. Black never is able to move f6, and White's really able to exploit this with his knight and rooks. So rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, and then here's the key tactical position. Neither player is able to, or neither of the pieces for black is able to take on f5 here. So basically, when this knight moves to f5, white can, basically white can retake on f5 with the rook, and neither of the pieces can take it. So yeah, so this rook takes knight here, rook takes, and then queen to f4, rook to f2, and then you have this threat on f4. But yeah, yeah, so yeah, I mean, this, I'm going through it quickly because we only have so much time. But yeah, I think basically this tactical plan, this larger tactical plan, exploiting f6. I think that is a good way for basically a good way for white to play this, and yeah, well, yeah, I mean, not. I guess I would slow that down a little bit, but yes, basically. So bishop to h6, queen takes h6. And then, basically black is squaring up on the f file. Yeah, so I guess technically, yes. I mean, technically this is lining up on, AR f1 or h3, okay, moves the bishop back, but rook to f1 does strengthen this play on f6. With that, knight to b1, d5. Hey, welcome, Limestone. Thank you very much for joining the stream. So yeah, pawn takes e4, knight takes e4. And it's this ultimate tactic, but basically this tactic here does make use of the f6 square. Rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, and here, yeah. Hey, welcome, Abraham. Thanks very much for joining the stream, everyone. But yeah, this is a super instructive game. Thanks, Lauren. Always super helpful to have you participate. And it's but yeah, basically, this pressure on f6. That white's able to exploit with these rooks. That's really what this is about. And then the pressure that white exerts on this h7 square. That's really a good yeah. This was really a good attack for white. So really interesting. It basically trades out. It trades out. These are GMs on. Yeah. So good point. Basically this is. I hope this provides kind of a deeper understanding of how to. Basically why the bishop is playing to h6 is the real question. Like, why does bishop to h6 get played here? And the reason why bishop to h6 gets played here is not just because this bishop is worse and non-fianchettoed. It's because if you make this trade, it also exploits the weak squares around the king. So that's the part that I had an incomplete understanding of until today. And then once I actually looked over these games, it made a lot more sense. So yeah, this is a positional this is a positional benefit that you can do in your game. I think you need to have the tactical backing required in order to fully understand how to exploit the weak squares around the king. But this is why that maneuver is made. This bishop to h6 maneuver, trading off the bishop. The goal of that, basically, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, is to be able to not just trade off the bishop for the sake of trading off the bishop, but you also advance the rest of your tactics by weakening the same colored squares around the opponent's king. That's why this battery makes sense, and that's why they spend why players make so many tempos in order to make that happen. I also think that the end game here is kind of interesting. The engine sees this as dead one, basically. As soon as this, two pieces for the bishop, or two pieces for the rook situation happens, the engine gives a huge positive analysis for white. But yeah, I guess what's interesting about this is, white's up like 4.5 pawns here. I mean, this is a big advantage for white. But it's kind of interesting how both the engine and the players are both very familiar with how to exploit this and how to turn this into a victory. In my eyes, if we look at this, I think that's a good demonstration. I completely agree, Lauren, and it is. So how do you exploit weak squares? Lauren gives a great answer on this. Sorry, got a second behind the chat, but yeah, cool. Hey, thanks for being here, Alexandre. Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, good night. Thank you for being here. By the way, we have a special event tomorrow. I'm doing a simul. I'm trying to get as many people as possible, but basically I'm going to do a simul, which is going to be 90 minutes plus 30-second, or 90 minutes plus 60-second increments. It'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So let me just write it out. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexandre. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all the help that everyone provides. It's really very nice, and yeah, if anyone is interested in playing me in a simul tomorrow, this is the information. I just wanted to make sure that everyone here is aware of it. I'm hoping for 50 people. We'll see if we actually get 50. We've been getting on Tuesdays. We've been getting 30s, but yeah. What do you think is a good elo? I mean, that would be cool. Look, we had 27 this week, and that was only the second time that we did this. This is the first one that I'm doing with Chess Academy Discord. Chess Academy Discord has 17,000 people, and yeah, I'm really excited to be working with that partnership. I think it'll be really helpful, and we'll be able to do a lot of free events and make chess a lot more free and accessible to everyone. No, good question. Good question, Abraham. Honestly, I guess what I would say about chess improvement. I guess the main thing about chess is that it stays fun, right? So that's kind of That's kind of a simple approach, but the main thing is that it stays fun. So first, the first thing about chess is that the person who wins chess is the one who continues to play because they enjoy it, right? Or the one who enjoys doing this. Like, realistically, I think that the ship has sailed on all of us becoming world champions in our lifetime. Not trying to shoot anyone's hopes down or anything, but I think Magnus Carlsen's got a pretty good monopoly on that one. But yeah, I don't think that any of us is going to be world champion, or really be a high level GM. But 1700 is great for 6 months. But what I'm saying is basically, the main point here is that you want to play chess so that you enjoy it. You want to continue to improve, and you want to, because I think it's fun to improve and kind of fun to see how good you can get at it. But yeah, the end winner with chess is the one who has fun doing it, right? In my opinion. There may be GMs who have different approaches, but I'm very happy with my relationship to chess. It's something that I do for fun. It's like one of these things like this. Today I bought like a plant in a like a pot, and it's like what benefit do I get from like growing a plant, right? Like yeah, the mental process of solving the puzzle. It's something that's just genuinely fun to do, right? And it's fun to see yourself improve, and it's fun to be in, a competition where both players are trying their hardest. But that's the main point of chess. So I guess I wouldn't say, I wouldn't stress about any good or bad rating after 6 months. I just treat it the same way that I would treat, the plant that I'm growing in my apartment now. It's fun for me to play. It's fun for me to see kind of where it goes. And, I have other things that I do. This isn't what I do for a living. This is just something that I enjoy and that I've had a good time with over the course of many years. So yeah, that's I think the end goal, in my opinion. All right, so sorry for that tangent, but is 1700 good for 6 months? Yes, Abraham, 1700 is excellent for 6 months. I don't know many people who have gotten to 1700 in 6 months. But that said, what I would say about getting to 1700, a great way to improve from 1700, or basically from 1200 to 2000, is through tactics training. So these two tools that I like on chess.com, this Puzzle Rush and this Puzzle Battle. I think these are two great tactics trainers, and I think that they, if you do those frequently, that will be your quickest way to improve at the 6 month mark, whatever your rating is. So if you're at the 6 month mark and you're playing, Puzzle Battle and you're playing Puzzle Rush, that's going to provide you the most, that's going to provide you the most benefits. Uh, yeah, honestly, I agree. You really just play and you kind of enjoy the way that the pieces fit together and the kind of options that things can go to. I have, in my life, I've probably had about 10 wins in chess that have been really, really memorable for me. But, that's a very small minority of games. I've probably won 50,000 chess games in my life or something. I mean, of those, I remember 10. The most important thing, the thing that's the most fun for me is getting a deeper understanding for the sake of getting a deeper understanding. This isn't, it's a board game at the end of the day, right? It's not a profession. It's amazing that the highest level players can make money from it, but it's something to do for fun. It's not something to do. It doesn't contribute to the overall social good, right? It's only an entertainment source, which is fine. It's great. It's great that it's like that. But yeah, this isn't meant to be your job. Your job is not playing a board game, in my opinion. But anyways, that's my opinion. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of negative in terms of the sense of using a board game to playing a board game professionally is a difficult thing for me to get my mind around. Right. So it's entertainment. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. So entertainment. It's value in entertainment. So that's the expectation out of 6 months of play. If you've enjoyed playing chess for 6 months, then you've won, right? That's my opinion. Is if if you've enjoyed playing chess for 6 months, that's the biggest win of all, regardless of where your rating is. So, anyways, whatever. That's my topic, or that's my thoughts on that. All right, so aside from that tangent that I went on, but yeah, 1700 is great for 6 months. So definitely keep at it, and tactics trainers are a good way to improve efficiently. Cool. So this is Carlson versus uh, interesting. Huh. That's very interesting, Lauren. Yeah, I believe it. Um, yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree that there's value. I completely agree that there's value in it. Yeah. So knight f3, g3, c5, bishop to g2, knight to c6, and yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's sort of necessary to keep people happy, right? But yeah, that is interesting. That's an interesting case study, Lauren. Anyways, what's going on here is basically this is an unusual opening. So this is the ready, right? And this ready opening, g3, c5, bishop to g2, knight to c6, castles, e5. Basically, this looks like so King's Indian attack ready. It's just unusual to see c5 and e5 played like this, in my opinion. I guess they're both defended. I guess this is fine, but I just think of this as kind of an unusual sideline. Where the real divergence was here, so c5, knight to c6, castles, e5, e4, d6. Yeah, I mean, basically here, White's getting this e5, c5 structure, which has some characteristics that are similar to the Sicilian, and has some characteristics that are similar to the normal ready. But yeah, this is interesting. Anyways, what I mainly wanted to show off here was this threats, these threats on g5, and basically pressure that this bishop on, basically puts on h6 here. This is a game where White gets this battery of bishop to e3 and queen to d2 and bishop to h6, and I don't think this one has as dynamic an attack for White. But bishop to h6, similar to the last game, is used to kind of advance White's attack and to try to generate weak squares around the king. What's interesting about this one, though, is in this case, Black's not forced to trade. So partially because this bishop is forced, so bishop to h6 is basically an improvement for White here. Bishop to h6, bishop to h8. So this, in this situation, Black declines the trade of bishops here. So yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. No, there's definitely value. There's lots of value in entertainment. I mean, if there wasn't value in entertainment, no one would pay for a movie ticket or a uh, theater ticket, sports game ticket, whatever. There's obviously economic value. Otherwise, people wouldn't pay for entertainment. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah. So anyways, maximizing on these types of things, I think is definitely a valuable thing to do. It's great that we have these kind of great free channels now in order to advance, and basically in order to make sure that things are as good as we possibly can have. Yeah, everyone should have access. If the cost should be free, I completely agree. So that's where I would say that free is the best model. Free is what I'm going for here at least. And yeah, thank you very much. Always very interested to hear your insights, Lauren, and thank you for participating. So yeah, rook to c6 here. Basically, bishop plays to h6, and then with bishop to h8, this bishop's on this h6 diagonal. So I guess that this position's a little bit different than the previous one, right? The previous one we're kind of coordinating on this. We're basically, previously bishop to h6 was played with h7 still there, and in order to advance an attack. Here, basically, white's just, relocating the bishop, and these squares, this f6 g7, yeah, right. Here it basically doesn't force the it doesn't force the trade. So bishop to h8 is sometimes a resource that black has. It's usually a resource that black has if the bishop has, or if the rook has moved from h8. But here basically black doesn't relinquish these weak squares. Let's see if white's able to actually capitalize on this, or if, basically, this bishop's going to be stuck on h6. But basically, what was interesting about this position... Hey, thank you very much for joining the stream, Morellison. Thanks for joining. But yeah, I was... thanks a lot. Yeah, welcome to the free chess lessons. We do this twice a day at 8 a.m. Eastern and 9:35 p.m. Eastern, and we're really happy to have you here. So yeah, thank you very much for joining, More. Appreciate it. But yeah, so the lesson for tonight is basically how to exploit weak squares around the king. Yes, I do have an AGM title and a Life Master. Yeah, according to the USCF Federation. So whatever it is, I definitely know a few things. But yeah, what I really think was good and demonstrative about this game was this bishop to h6 move, right? So bishop to h6 pushes back bishop to h8. So, basically what's really interesting, I think, in terms of this assessment. Hey, Jen. Jen is at her dad's house tonight, but she is studying for a standardized test. So she's over there working hard on that. But also was nice enough to come join us. So cool. Thanks, Jen. Nice to see you. But yeah, so what I thought was really interesting here was basically, as opposed to letting white play bishop takes g7 here, right? So if you're black in this situation, you can allow bishop takes g7, in my eyes, right? Because you could play something along the lines of, knight to c3 or something. They're advancing moves for black that I think are reasonably solid. But what's interesting about black is that black chooses not to allow this trade on g7. Black views this bishop and these dark squares around the king as valuable enough to spend a tempo playing bishop to h8 on, right? I mean, that's basically the conclusion that you draw from this, right? Because there are straightforward developing moves that black can make that do not involve trading off the bishop. But instead, with bishop to h8, this this basically bishop to this bishop on this diagonal, this is really going to help the bishop's able to hold a lot of squares in advance here. Otherwise, white is left with these kind of weaker squares around the king. So black has determined for a few. So what are the reasons specifically that black's willing to spend a tempo on bishop to h8? Part of it is because part of it is because this is white's worst square bishop and this is black's better square bishop, and this diagonal for black is stronger than this diagonal for white. That's part of it. But part of it also is about maintaining defense on the weak dark squares around the king. Basically, if the bishop trades off, then f6 is a lot weaker defended by black, e5 is a lot weaker defended by black, and d4 is a lot weaker defended by black. So that's basically the point. That's sort of what I'm getting at here. And basically, with bishop to h8, rook to c6, yeah. Bishop trade on g7 here is not for an attack, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, no. So that's right. I mean, basically, in this situation, black is willing to hold on to the strength of his bishop because of the value that it provides on this diagonal versus the bishop on this diagonal. So that, I don't know. I just thought this was interesting. I was sort of looking for games in which bishop to h8 was played against the bishop to h6 tactic, and that tends to be played more frequently, or basically that's played in games where the rook has already left the f8 square. But yeah, so yeah, this is interesting. Well, I mean, it's forced, right? So that's the question. Where should the white bishop go? Between f4, g5, and h6. Those are the three choices for white. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so I don't know if it's not forced to be h6, but it's forced to move from bishop to e3. So we've got two bishop moves here that are kind of interesting and unusual. Yeah, but I mean, it's still interesting that h6 is kind of determined to be the strongest diagonal for white. Yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, basically, white's trying to generate this trade on h6 for the g7 bishop. Yep. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. I thought this was an interesting demonstration, and yeah, no, Carlsen, Karjakin, definitely, or Karyakin, definitely very high level players. So I deferred to them for ideas, but this particular maneuver I thought was interesting. So the bishop to h6 is but I'm still a little bit surprised that it's not bishop to f4. In this game, so bishop to h6 is objectively better, as I'm sure Carlsen is. It's like bishop to h6 clearly is the best, but yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit surprised that basically putting your bishop also on the last diagonal. I guess it's a little bit helpful in terms of restricting mobility for the king. Why does the bishop to f4 say that, or why does the computer say that bishop to f4 is bad? Yeah, totally. No, definitely. So yeah, so here, knight to c3, that's expected. Because otherwise, because I was thinking the rook would be able to go to c6 and then play on to d6. But yeah, knight to c3, sure. Rook to e1, queen to c7, bishop to g5, bishop g5, f3. Yeah, I mean, I basically think that this is all, well, I mean, yeah, and then it moves to h6 file anyways. Yeah, so that's the computer line. This is interesting. Well, it's sort of interesting, I guess. Yeah, no, so, but I don't see why it's bad necessarily. Rook to e1, bishop to e5. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's gonna be the explanation for why bishop to h6 is the best. At least bishop to h6 forces the bishop, or basically encourages black to spend a tempo on bishop to h8. Yeah, totally. No. Let's take a look at this line. This is really interesting. So yeah, bishop to f4, knight to c3, rook to e1, bishop to e5. I guess it's probably just that this bishop. So see, it's kind of funny. Like this bishop is actually totally fine trading off on e5 or trading off on f4, right? But it's not fine trading off on g7. So I think that's kind of interesting too. Like black is willing to spend tempo requesting the trade here, right? If the bishop's on f4, then black is trying to trade off the bishop on e5 or f4. Right, yeah. So obviously bishop takes e5 is bad, but it's actually enough to encourage white to move bishop to g5. So white wants the trade on h6, but doesn't want the trade on f4, right? Is the conclusion that you would draw from this? I think. Right? So the bishop to h6 line encourages black to trade on h6. But on bishop to f4, this bishop to e5. Now white's actually making the effort to not trade the bishop on f4, which is a little weird. I'd have to really think about why that is the case, right? Um, yeah. Well, if what? Well, yes, right. But I guess I'm still confused on why white would be not okay. Uh, but what's so bad about trading? I guess what I'm curious about is like what's bad about trading on f4 and good about trading on h6? Because here, like white's making the tempo effort to play to bishop to h6, and black's making the effort to avoid it, right? So on bishop to h6, the bishop avoids the trade. So pawn takes, bishop to h6, and then black's spending the tempo to not trade. If bishop to f4, then black is spending the effort, or then white is spending the effort to not trade as opposed to trade. Uh, d4 becomes weak if you can trade on h6. Um, right. But why is white spending the tempo to avoid the bishop on e5? Like, why is it that white just wants this diagonal now that it's open, or is it that white wants to not trade on f4? Well, I was thinking queen takes, but maybe I'm looking at something wrong. I was thinking if like I mean maybe f3 here. I mean I'm playing too quickly. Like you'd have to really think about all these moves. But okay, so f3, bishop to e6, and then this knight is sort of trapped. But yeah, so I'm curious. So yeah, let's look at the line. So bishop to f4. Knight to c3, rook to e1. The move that I don't understand is what I'm saying is in this line is bishop to g5. Like I think that here I would, as white, I would be fine playing bishop takes f4, queen takes f4. But I must be missing something. Well, good point. Yeah, there's not really much play for white here. So maybe just bishop going, yeah, maybe. No, it basically is, right? I guess that must be it. Uh, yeah, no. So I think it must be a zugzwang situation. Because in my mind, like it's fine for white to trade on f4. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it. But yeah, because white is. But what's weird to me is that white makes the effort to trade in the main line. So white makes the effort to trade on h6, and black avoids it. And then in this sideline, white or basically black makes the effort to trade on e5, and then white intentionally avoids it. But I guess it must be, yeah, I guess it must be zugzwang here, and basically white's pieces are all kind of where they're the most optimal, right? So this bishop moving to this it's better for white to move this bishop along this diagonal, and then not have to trade anything. So yeah, I guess. But anyways, that position is conceptually kind of interesting and complicated. So I have to think about that. Um, right. Yeah, it is a cool position, exactly, right? But yeah, I think that's a good explanation. It is like zugzwang, for sure. All right, cool. Bishop to h6, bishop h8, rook to c6, and here white's, I guess I would say white's pretty comfortable. Basically, white's gonna put pressure on d6, and then here eventually, and then what's crazy about this too, right? Um, uh, is here now bishop takes is the best. Like Why not bishop to g5 here now? So bishop to e5. Yeah, right. Now white's fine trading it, and now you're basically in the same position, right? Where bishop to g5 is inaccurate now. So yeah, bishop takes e5, and I guess knight to, or wait, no, the rook's hanging, so yeah, this is really complicated. Interesting. Yeah, f4 I guess is the play now. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting stuff, honestly. Yeah, but very interesting. I think this is a great game in terms of demonstrating kind of the basically the weak squares around the king. That was the point of this lesson, and I think that this game does a pretty good job of demonstrating it. There's just a lot of play along this diagonal. Basically, these four squares see a lot of play, or actually, really, these seven squares see a lot of play in this game. And yeah, overall, this shows basically some very situationally specific things that are helpful in attacking these dark squares around the king. Pretty much everything else, yeah, we saw that zugzwang position. Everything else is kind of static and stuck in this place. And basically, all of all these diagonal plays for black here were interesting and offered white and black kind of a series of complex decisions. No, we can't really do it justice in a week, or sorry, in a 15-minute section. But yeah, spending a week to really understand the full intricacies here probably would be a cool exercise. Anyways, this is Carlson carjacking in St. Louis, 2017. But yeah, very interesting game, very interesting play, and a good demonstration, I think, of how open squares around the king are utilized by the highest level players. Anyways, interesting game, interesting stuff. Cool. Yeah. So I was gonna move on to game analysis here. For anyone interested, we're doing a simul tomorrow. Simul tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know if you guys can make it or not, but I'm trying to get a whole bunch of people for a game in 90 plus 60-second simul tomorrow. Do I use Chessable to learn openings? I haven't, to be completely honest. I'm in favor of free material. I'm in favor of free free modules and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll check it out, pretty boy. I think that's very interesting to check it out. Yeah, I should really. I feel like, to be completely honest, I feel like I do a good amount of chess. But maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll take a look to get some insights into lessons that I can put together. I guess I would say, in terms of my my time, I'm at the upper limit of how much chess I can do. Yeah, I should check it out. Chessable seems to be a good thing, and as long as the material is free, I'm fully in favor of it. Free courses, free education. I think it's great. Cool, interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, free resources I think are great. Any free resources that are there, anything that makes things more accessible to everyone, I'm in favor of that. So yeah, I'll check it out. Good question, pretty boy. I'll check it out. That's interesting. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the games for tonight. We have three, and yeah, let's take a look. Okay, just let me pull this one up. Okay, cool. This game is from TK. Just pulling it from Lichess. And here we go. Okay, so this is Black playing this game, yeah, we'll take a look. He's playing a very strong player, 26-37, very strong, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's a cool project, Lauren. Yeah, let us know when it's finished, and you can definitely I'm sure many people on the Discord and on the stream would be interested in looking at that. That's very cool. Cool project, Lauren. This is TK's game. He's playing a probably like an IM here, this knight f3, d5, b3. Okay, I don't really know this opening super well. So this is Nimzowitsch Larsen out of the ready. Okay, cool. Oh, interesting. Good point. Well, I mean, aren't games public domain? It's a really good, interesting point. I'm actually really interested. If you know much about the specifics of that, I'm super interested. But I would figure that games from tournaments would be public domain. Plus, you might have a classroom exemption. Classroom exemption is also always good idea. That's what I would do there too. But yeah, very interesting stuff, Lauren. Good thinking. Cool. So knight to f3, b3, Nimzowitsch Larsen attack, c5, bishop to b2. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Camel. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining the stream. And basically here, d5, b3, c5, and basically with this bishop to b2, you're going to have aggressive play on g7, aggressive play on h8, and yeah. So basically this d5, c5, that will end up being pretty strong, good control for Black in this game, and I think this will be good. So, anyways, basically good. Capitalizing on the center. Basically, large center opening versus flank opening for Black here, and Black is looking pretty solid here. I think Black can play something like knight to c6 or knight to f6, and right. So knight c6, e3. Again, White's not really challenging for the center. I think knight to f6, solidifying e4 is probably a good idea. Black can't get e5 in. I don't think Black's gonna be able to play e5 at any point, but yeah, Black has better control of the center here for sure. White may play d4 actually, although that would sort of weaken the bishop on b2. But d4 would probably not be permanent there. Anyways, g6, castles, bishop to g7, d4, pawn takes, knight takes, and here knight to d2, and I would play actually probably I'm not sure you can play e5 here. Knight to f6, castles, bishop to g7, and as White d4, I guess probably. I would lean towards d4. White's basically been very passive in the center to this point, so d4 seems like the most reasonable break. Maybe c4 though. How does c4 work? c4 and then d4. I guess that leads to Black getting in, Black basically holding d4 fairly well. So I think d4 maybe is better for White. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm sort of surprised that this is so, or that this would be something that White would play to win a game. Like, I would figure that that Nimzo Larsen would be passive. This looks pretty passive to me. Yeah, yeah. So it's the hyper modern, like, undermine the center type idea. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know that. To be completely honest, I don't know this system. But d5, c5, bishop to b2. Cool. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, and yeah. So this is the post d4 trade. But White's, yeah, you're right. White ends up in a decent situation here. D4 seems like the right push, though. I think this is the right time and the right move for white to equalize in the center. And it's very efficient, I guess. You know, if you're basically playing on d4, you're basically, you know, controlling the center for white. This was very delayed, but it never really cost white at any point. Um, yeah, I mean, that's probably it too. But um, interesting. Yeah, I really should learn this system, Lauren. This is a very interesting. This is a very interesting system. So d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, castles. Yep. And then bishop to f5, which is one of the best moves. Basically, the engine's proposing knight takes d4 as an improvement. Let's see. We're still in opening theory, by the way, TK. So I'm impressed by the opening theory here. I guess you know, we're kind of move 9 or 10, still within the opening for this Nimzo Larsen. Interesting. Yeah, no, it's funny. I've never really known this theory, this Queen's Indian. Like, you know, as someone who's played e4 primarily, you know, my entire chess playing time, catching up on these systems that I don't know is really helpful. So yeah, knight to d2, bishop to f5. Better here, I think, was knight takes e4, or knight takes d4, but they're both in the opening book. Actually, no, sorry, bishop to f5 isn't in the opening book. The engine's recommending knight takes d4 or e8, which are both in the opening book. Not saying that bishop to f5 is particularly bad, but yeah, rook to e8, right? Rook to e8 with e5 getting threatened. That makes sense, for sure. But yeah, I think bishop to f5 doesn't really create any huge problems, but it does seem to give up one of your bishops for basically no compensation. You know, basically this knight is posted, but you can get it off of this post for a price that's cheaper than your bishop pair, I think. So that's why I'm thinking that bishop to f5, which gives up your bishop pair and doubles your pawns on the f-file, I think this is probably not correct. I think, yeah, the mainline move here is basically rook to e8 or rook to e8 or knight takes d4. But yeah, I think rook to e8 makes the most sense. Rook to e8 is the main line here, and I think that does make a lot of sense. Rook to e8 with bishop to f5 threatened. Interesting. Yeah, so bishop to f5, pawn takes f5, pawn takes f5, and then yeah, this e5 threat's going to be big. I think maybe f4 or knight to c3 potentially. C4 maybe. Something that challenged black on e5, I think. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this f5, e5, d5 structure would be strong for black probably, but I don't know. I guess I'm not completely sold on doubling the pawns and giving up the bishop pair. It seems like a pretty big cost to pay. You can displace this knight for more cheaply than that. Like, you can play rook to e8. Yeah, no, for sure. But no, that's a good explanation. So rook to e8, basically rook to e8 with you know, with e5 being a passable threat for black on the next move. But right, yeah. I mean, e5 definitely helps to justify it. Right. It makes sense in that context. Right. Yeah, so that is the plan. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation of the plan for black. Right. So bishop to f5 and e5. Yeah, that's the best. But yeah, anyways, I'm not sold on it. I think the main line rook to e8 is just a better line. So overall here, black's played theory up until this point, so I'm going to recommend sticking with theory and playing rook to e8 in this situation. I think this rook to e8 with e5 with the e5 push, that was a better continuation for black here. All right, bishop to f5, knight takes, pawn takes, knight to f3. All right, and white's got about, white's up, 0.4 pawns, whatever. But now it basically has doubled pawns and no longer has the bishop pair. And the knight is posted on d4 again anyways. So I don't know. So I'm not sold on that bishop to f5 move. rook to e8, the main line. Rook to e8, threatening e5 makes more sense. Yeah, right. Because if this knight is on d4, anyways, now you've basically just kind of disrupted your pawn structure and given up the bishop pair. Why e6 after the knight goes back to d5? Yeah, so yes. Well, I mean, or why e6? So the knight takes f5, I assume, right? Unless there's some. I think yeah. I mean, I think delaying it. Yeah. So queen to d7, e5 maybe, but yeah, I think that's probably queen to e7, e5 might be better. Anyways, this whole strategy basically, this knight going on to d4, that wasn't particularly, or basically, this knight, black reposted or white reposted the knight on d4. So overall, I think that this situation basically is going to be good for black. Queen f3, b6, queen e7, and yeah, I mean basically here, I don't know. I think that the knight to d7, yeah, the pawn structures are big, yeah, big discrepancy there for sure. And then we get to kind of a volatile late game situation. Okay, so yeah, I mean, both players played theory well and played it well into this game, and then yeah. So in terms of looking at things to improve from this game, bishop to f5 is not as good as the main line rook to e8. Hey, thanks for joining the stream, Camel. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so bishop to f5, knight takes f5, pawn takes f5, knight to f3. And yeah, knight to d4, e6. Basically, I guess I would say that this is probably pretty good for black, or sorry, pretty good for black here. Pawn takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen to f3, and yeah, I think basically here white's just kind of fine. I don't think there's any issue. I think this is overall nothing too complicated. I don't know. What about knight takes d4 followed by e5 instead of e6? Later or where? So knight d4 and then knight takes d4 here, or so knight takes d4 and then e5 here, or earlier. Well, I mean, I assume that pawn takes d4, right? Or I assume it's pawn takes. Am I wrong about that, or? Oh, yeah, knight takes d4 instead of e6, right? Yeah, so I guess I would look at pawn takes first. But I don't know, is black maybe queen to b6, queen to c7? I don't know. Bishop to b5 over bishop to e2 in the opening. Yeah, we can take a look. Yeah. Anyways, I think this is a pretty close to equals, right? Pretty close. I mean, I don't know. Pretty close. Yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look at that, Camel. I'm curious. So played bishop to b5 over bishop to e2 in the opening. Yeah, we can take a look at that line. So here, bishop to b5. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a more main line. Bishop to b5 as opposed to bishop to e2. I don't know. Anyways, these guys played theory way further than I know it. I don't know this system. But anyways, this ends up in a situation where where white basically gets a kind of cemented advantage. Bishop to f5, I think, was the move to revisit for this game. But yeah, I think after here e6, overall, I just think bishop to f5 didn't succeed for a number of reasons. I think instead rook to e8 is better. Rook to e8, looking at e5 push, that should be a better way to play. But yeah, anyways, yeah, I don't think there's much in that way. I think rook to e8 and then e5. Um, Here, which one? Bishop to f. So, anyways, I just want to sort of get to. I sort of want to just get to the end of this basically. In this game, I think that basically, so white, knight to d7, bishop takes g7, king takes g7. Overall, this situation, this leads to an advantage for white. I think white's got a pretty good tactical follow up here. Bishop to d6 seems to cause problems for black. I don't know. Honestly, once this gets into tactical play, I'm kind of like, I'm just going to end up looking at the engine, so. Rook to d1, knight takes, rook takes. So yeah, I mean, basically, this ends up being a relatively equal rook and queen endgame. Rook f1, queen to g5 is an error. This is a 7-point swing in volatility, so queen to g5 leads to queen takes f7, and basically white's going to have the sustained attack on this king side. Queen takes, queen to g7, queen takes e6. Yeah, white should be one after that. So the king side basically falls apart there, and yeah, I mean, basically when this starts to turn into a, it turns into a tactical game. This, nothing here is particularly strong for, or basically, white basically gets this. I don't know. White basically outplays black tactically. Is the end situation. So I don't really have much to offer. From the end of this. Basically the position. A human coach really only offers value in non-tactical situations. In tactical situations, the computer's better than every human. So yeah, at the end of the day, the tactical errors, I can show specifically what they are as determined by engine output, but the the end conclusion of this is you'll maximize if you study tactics more. So yeah, in this situation, queen to g5 is a big error. It basically hangs f7. So yeah. Anyways, interesting game, interesting situation. And in this game overall, I guess what I would say is that basically, you guys played opening theory way further than I, basically way further than I know it in this Nimzo Larsen attack. Bishop to f5, knight takes, pawn takes, knight to f3. Okay, sure. I mean, basically everything's here, and or basically everything is straightforward. We've discussed it. Bishop to f5 is clearly worse than rook to e8, which is the main line. Rook to e8, e5 in mind. This doubles the pawns, and it didn't even succeed in getting the knight posted on d4. So rook to e8, knight to d4, and then probably queen to d7. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, I'm an e4 player. Like, my knowledge of these openings is pretty limited. But it's super helpful for me to get to look at them on the stream, to be honest. Basically getting good opportunities to study material that I haven't is kind of ideal. You get stuck playing the same openings over and over again, and then it's kind of interesting. So let's see. So yeah, we can take a look. We can take a look at just since I'm here, we can take a look, and we can basically we have two more games, I think. But yeah, tactical study is the most important. And what I would say here is basically that the way that you can kind of improve your game from about 1200 to about 2000 is almost exclusively through tactical study. That's probably the most efficient way that you can do it. Having a more complete understanding of the game is important, but tactical study I think is really where it's at the end of the day. We have Puzzle Battle and Puzzle Rush, and if anybody's here, oh, by the way, we have a what do I recommend to avoid losing concentration? I guess I would say Puzzle Battle. Like, here, let's just do this. I'll just play a Puzzle Battle real quick. And hey, thank you very much for joining, Lauren. Thanks very much for contributing and for participating in the stream. It's always very helpful. Thank you always very much for the material, or basically the contribution of thoughts to the stream. So thanks very much. So yeah, I guess what I would say here is basically these threats, or basically sustained attention, right, is an important thing, and tactical play is an important thing. So what you can do is you can basically play Puzzle Rush or Puzzle Battle for an hour or two a day for like a month, and you'll be very impressed by how much you'll advance. Really, you can get very far with pretty tactically focused training, and with that, I think basically your game will improve a lot. So that's sort of what I'm getting at here. I just wanted to show off Puzzle. I think Puzzle Battle is a great thing because it basically gamifies, puzzle study, and I think, or basically tactical study. So I think that turning this into, basically turning this puzzle training into a competition was actually a really cool idea by chess.com. So I really like this tool. I think it's a great one to train on. And yeah, basically, I don't like playing much on the stream. I basically, my goal is to make it so that chess lessons are free and available to everyone. How does, me doing tactics fit into that? But I just wanted to show off this tool. It's great. And basically here, you can come up with, you can play high-level players. There's plenty of high-level players on this. And you can go over, 30, 40 puzzles really quick and basically be able to improve your tactics that way. This is a game versus an FM, I guess. But yeah, you basically can use the tools that are available for you, do a lot of tactics training, and that should be helpful. Tactics training is one of those things that you just have to kind of keep persistent about. You do get rusty, but in any case, this, these tools are an excellent opportunity to help you improve. So these are here. This is good. And I just wanted to show you guys kind of the value of this the value of this as a training tool. I put a lot of time into this, and I think that it will help you a lot. So anyways, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So this is here. This is something that you could use, and I think that if you do it, it will really help your game a lot. So Queen B4. Yeah, there we go. That one took me a second. All right, and then we got the win over the FM, so that's always a good sign. All right, so I just wanted to show you Puzzle Battle is a great game, great puzzle trainer, and yeah, that is a good demonstration, I think, of a tactical tool that you can use to try to improve quickly. And yeah, just thinking that might be a good a good thing for you. So, anyways, thanks very much for bearing with me. I don't like to play much. I don't like to do much training, but I thought that demonstrating this tactics training could be very helpful in terms of showing you the resources that are available for your training. Anyways, let's take a look back to a chess.com review. And here we go. Okay, here's a game from Suban Budo. All right. Okay. So Suban Budo is playing white, and he plays d4, d5, bishop to f4. Okay. And then black plays knight to f6. Let's take a look at the let's just look at the engine here. Okay, so knight to f3, knight to f6 or knight to c6, and it looks like white's up by about 4/10 of a pawn. Okay. This is a pretty volatile game. Okay. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really, I just leave this one to chess.com. I think chess.com's got a pretty good handle on these things. This eval certainly wouldn't indicate that anyone is cheating in this game. Let's just do this. This will make life easier. I said that I would look at his game. This game, I don't know. But let's just take a look. How about this? Um, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't really care very much. And if it makes life easier, we can just take the names off of this game. Here we go. Yeah, I don't really care. Honestly, it's obviously cheating. Cheating is a terrible thing, and all I can say is that I've been playing for 20 plus years and never done it a single time. I think it's a pretty bad thing to do to a board game. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're cheating at a board game, I really think that's kind of pathetic in many ways. So I don't know. In terms of determining who is and isn't cheating, I'm just going to stay out of that conversation. But I do think that chess cheaters are really not okay. It's just pathetic is the main. I'm just going to leave this alone. But as a broad picture, without referring to any specific concepts, cheating at chess is a pathetic thing to do. It's just sad. It's like, who would. I know. I mean, I don't know. So I'm staying out of that topic. I have no value to add determining who is and who isn't cheating. All I can say is that I've never done it in my life, and that is, that's something that I have some level of pride about. That said, if chess is important to you to the point where you're cheating, that says bad things about your personality. Is how I would address that. Anyways, I don't know. But I'm just going to stay out of that conversation entirely. All I know is that I don't do it. I have never done it, and that's really all that I have control over at the end of the day. All right, cool. So d4, d5, bishop to f4, knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to c6. Okay. All right, let's take a look. White's up by about 0.3 here. Yeah, basically against the London system, I have this bias where I keep trying to turn this, I basically try to turn the London system. I try to turn almost every Queen's Pawn game into e6 and c6. Or basically a semi-Slav structure. But yeah, so d4, d5, bishop f4, knight to f6. This is a game that's good for white. London system, one of the most solid openings. Knight to f3. Black has a bunch of choices here. Challenging the center or using the c6 pawn or c7 pawn as a resource on either c6 or c5. That is a helpful way to go about this. So knight to c6 basically eliminates that resource for black. That's why I think that knight to c6 in general is something that's to be avoided. Basically shifts the eval half a point away from black here, and yeah, basically this knight to c6, moves white about half a pawn ahead. Okay, so ideas for black. I don't know. c5 challenges the center immediately. E6, c6. Okay. Knight to c6, e3. Ideas for black include knight to e4, c4, e6, and basically defending this pawn on d5. Overall, this should be good for black. Or basically this should be good for basically solid for black. It should basically maintain the situation. It is an advanced knight to c4. It is an advanced knight to c6. These are overall unusual lines, but not anything that takes you fully out of the opening theory. Knight to e4 takes basically black out of the opening theory, and lines like bishop to g4 could be helpful. Lines like bishop to f5 could be helpful. But here, basically, black will have the opportunity to basically pin here, develop a piece, and make the most out of this kind of stunted development of c7. So I think instead c5 or c6 could be helpful for black. But yeah, things like bishop to f5 might be good. Things like c5 might be good. But yeah, pressure on the center seems like an idea. So knight to c6, I would say, is an error. Just so I remember, actually. Let's look. So white is the one who sent this game in. So knight to c6 is an error for black. This causes a problem with the pawn on c7. White plays something like e3, knight e4, and basically black has played himself out of the opening book here. Pawn takes d5, bishop to d3, knight to bishop to b4, and with bishop to b4 here, so bishop to d3 is considered to be inaccurate. Basically fighting, black advancements on the king side. I wouldn't have necessarily seen this idea, but g5, bishop to g3, this should be, I guess this should be fine. So bishop to g3, h5, knight e5, okay. All of that seems fairly reasonable. But yeah, let's look. So d4, d5, bishop to f4, knight to f6. I don't know. Bishop to b4, okay. Yeah, we're out of theory here, but this seems like a pretty volatile move. Knight to c3, knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, and white decides to sacrifice this whole exchange. That can't be right. I don't think that's correct. But let's see improvements. So black, basically the engine comes up with the idea g5, and then black could play something like bishop to g3. Black could play h5, h4, and basically put pressure on the, basically put pressure on this bishop on g3. Yeah, sure, Matt. Yeah, no problem at all. I could take a look. In terms of best games that I've played, I certainly have memorable ones. But yeah, best ones is kind of a complicated question. Whether this, basically whether you can put, pressure on, or basically like, best pressure on me to determine what is the best game. I don't know. I mean, is the best game the one in which you have, one or two great brilliancies, or is it the one in which you actually like have like an overall really high accuracy score? I don't know. It's a tough question to me. The ones that I have the easiest access to are the online games, and those ones, I don't know. But yeah, sure, I can bring more games into the stream. One of these things I was talking about, though, Matt, is one of the things is I prefer to show games that I lost. To be honest, I think it's kind of pretentious that basically, high-level masters only show their wins, or most frequently show their wins. I think it's way better. I'm trying to equalize things by only showing my losses. So the games that I like showing the most out of, basically out of my own personal games are ones where, people have beaten me. But yeah, we can show wins too, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just sort of think it's lame. You get basically learn much more from your losses. It's helpful for me because I get to look at it. Basically, but I just, for me, I don't know. There's some element of ego to it that I think's kind of silly. It's a board game, at the end of the day. So it's like, how prideful can you get about your play? You can enjoy playing and you can want to improve, but yeah, it's, I don't know. Anyways, g5, bishop to g3, and yeah, basically this situation, d4, d5, bishop to f4, knight to f6, knight to c6. This c7 pawn is blocked by the, or this knight blocks this c7 pawn as a resource. Knight to e4, c4. But yeah, I only want to show losses on my stream, if nothing else, just to even things out. In my opinion, we can, so might as well. But basically here, bishop to b4, white's up by about half a pawn. Best play here was knight fd2. This sidesteps that crazy threat with, basically there's a, knight fd2. Basically there's a threat with this, threat that happens with knight to c3. Knight fd2, knight takes d2, knight takes d2, and white is, white's fine. This shouldn't be a problem for white. Better for black was the thing that the engine comes up with, g5, putting pressure on this bishop and starting a whole bunch of stuff on the king side. White plays to bishop to g3, black plays h5, h4. Overall here, I think black's putting a lot of pressure on white, and this should be okay. So anyways, that's a slight improvement. Bishop to b4, knight to c3 I think is weak. Knight fd2 I think is better. And here, yeah, queen takes a1, sure. Bishop to e6, and black I think is solid. Castles, queen d7, a4, a6. Black should be better. White gives up this exchange a little bit easily, in my opinion. So yeah, in terms of looking at ways that white could have improved this game, knight fd2 here is the move. From this point, there's two moves. So knight fd2 is the one that's the better move here. But the move that plays before that, bishop to d3, I think instead probably a more straightforward move, something like I don't know. Bishop. How about bishop to b5? Is this a big error too? Not nearly as bad. I guess the value in bishop to b5 is that it doesn't allow black to basically attack on this side. If black plays something like g5, white can play bishop to e5, and this black bishop, this black or white bishop is facing towards the king. So this is a pin here, right? So g5, bishop to e5, and white is fine. So yeah, I guess I would say there bishop to g5 is probably a better way to play this. And with this in mind, bishop to g5 facing on e8, yeah, stronger. So g5, it basically takes a lot of the threat out of g5 if bishop to e5 is available as a resource for white to play here. So anyways, I think that's basically it. And yeah, so d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3. Yeah, so this knight gets in front of this pawn, and this pawn can't play to c6, c5. That's an error. White has a better move than bishop to d3. White could instead play bishop to b5. Bishop to b5 is facing against king to e8. That's better. Knight to d2, and yeah, knight fd2 is a tactical improvement. So in terms, there are basically two moves here that are responsible for giving black an advantage. The first of these is playing bishop to d3. This move just isn't that effective. I mean, it doesn't really do anything. Black can play g5. Black can play, or white can then follow up with bishop to g3. But yeah, basically here g5, bishop g3, and white's pretty safe. So bishop to b5 instead. I think this is good, and this bishop on b5 is facing e8. Cool. So I think that's better for white to play bishop to b5, and then instead of knight to c3, which allows black to, or basically allows black to win an exchange. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes c3, knight to d2, bishop takes a1, queen takes a1. Here, black's up by about 2 pawns, and yeah, should be pretty smooth. A4, a6. I guess here what I would probably try to do is, I mean, I might play knight to b3. I guess that's fairly easily dealt with, b6, but overall here, I think white is fine. Fine. This is a terrible move by black. Basically, black is doing great here. He's up in exchange. And it's really an error for black to castle queenside. This really hurts black's king safety. If black castles kingside, this is a this is a much better way to play. So rook to c1, knight to b4, bishop takes, bishop e8. Yeah, black had no reason to jeopardize his king safety there, and yeah. I think instead, rook takes c7. This seems better for rook takes c7. I think is a better option for white. This sort of, kind of, basically black doesn't have effective defense, and now we get into this whole situation where things are extremely volatile, and we're just kind of looking at, imperfect tactical play. So I don't think I can add much value there. Anyways, what I would take from this situation is, this Knight to e4 was not a great move, but that said, bishop to d3 was kind of aimless. This wasn't super helpful, and it allowed black to push on g5. Instead, bishop to b5, this bishop to b5 facing e8, that I think is I think that's an error. Or bishop to d3 as opposed to bishop to b5 is an error. Bishop to b5 is better. The engine, by the way, recommends knight to f d2. That seems like a pretty engine-like line. I'm not super into those. I don't know. I guess it's objectively the best, but bishop to b5 putting pressure on this king here. I think that's a good way to do this. Basically bishop to b5 facing this king on e8. I think that's a stronger idea. So that's what I would probably think of in terms of improving this. Bishop to d3, bishop to b4, knight f d2, and yeah, now white's up by about half a pawn, and I think this continuation is much better than the one in which white loses the exchange. So after knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. Okay, cool. Anyways, bishop takes, king f1 probably, king e2. Threats on, bishop takes a1, queen takes a1. And yeah, I guess I would say that overall that's, that provides better opportunities for white. So king f1 here probably, and king f1, and regardless, white is worse. Knight to f2 is the response move. King to f1 is slightly better, like I was saying, but yeah, bishop takes at a1, and then queen takes a1, and white is worse off. But okay, those are the two moves. Those are the two that I'd be focused on, and yeah, bishop to d3 definitely not as good as bishop to b5. And then knight to fd2 definitely better than knight to c3. Probably the knight to fd2 is the more fixable one, right? Putting your knight on this point, really allows black to attack aggressively. So knight takes d2, knight takes d2, bishop takes d2. Overall, that's kind of, I guess I would say that's kind of it's a little bit constrained, not super good, but at least it doesn't allow this knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, bishop takes c3 fork. Overall here, this seems to be this seems to be kind of problematic, and knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. All right. Anyways, that is that for that game. Those are the two moves that I would be focused on as white, and thank you very much for sending it in. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at the next one. All right. Cool. So this is Brendan's game. Brendan was here earlier. Thank you very much for being here, Brendan. Thank you very much for sending the game. And yeah, cool. Yeah, we're finally here. Thanks for waiting around. We're going a little bit over time, but I kind of wanted to look at some of the stuff in that game. Okay, cool. So d4, d5, bishop to f4. I think basically this is, the London system is an extremely solid way to play against the, against in queen's pawn games. I think this is a good way to play. I think this is consistently strong. And yeah, bishop to f4, knight to f6, e3, just solid for white. This is consistently good, and no problems there. c5, knight to f3, knight to c6. Hey, welcome, Prince. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But yeah, so basically London system, this, unlike the last one, doesn't involve knight to c6. We can just see how much healthier things are with basically threats on basically without that c7 pawn stuck on c7. If the c5 is played and then knight to c6 is played, this bishop to b5 holds that diagonal fairly well. So bn d2, pawn takes, bishop to b4, c3. Overall here, I think white is fine. No issues. Just kind of your standard London system. This is basically what London is playing for. There's no great attacks. There's no real issues, but it just provides a solid a solid advantage. There's a reason why it's considered to be one of the best openings at this point. I think overall it's great, just really solid and no real issues. So yeah, I think that is a strong way for white to play a game. Basically, it's one of those games that's really proposed by world champions and engines. So the London system, I think, is great. I'm an e4 player, so I like playing the e4 games, but But in terms of things that are objectively good, bishop to f4 is an objectively good move out of d4, d5. So anyways, queen to a4, queen to a5, bishop to b5, queen takes, bishop takes. All right. And yeah, white's, basically white's solid. Up by about 3/10 of a pawn. I don't think black's going to have much here. Knight takes, pawn takes, b4, knight d7. Just, kind of a comfortable position. This bishop pair provides an advantage for white. In terms of looking at this opening, I don't think there were many errors. I think basically we played a move 15 with pretty much error-free game. This is the book. I guess queen a5, or sorry, queen to a5 and bishop to b5 are considered to be slightly worse. On queen to a5, queen takes a5, knight takes a5. Yeah, this actually does seem to be better for white. Next, knight to e5 here, and you're gonna probably, I guess I would say you're at least gonna get the bishop pair. I don't know if you can quite win a pawn here. Rook to c8 looks playable. On a6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, maybe f3, maybe knight takes c6. On knight takes c6, is there a way for black to get the pawn back? I'm not sure. So yeah, bishop to f5, okay. Bishop to f5, f3. I don't know. I think white's in pretty good shape. Up about a pawn. Black's king side's kind of mangled. I mean, black might have the strength with rook to b8 later, but I don't know. Okay, d4, d5, bishop f4, knight to f3, knight d2, pawn takes. Okay. Queen a5, not the best. It allows that tactic that we just saw with queen takes a5, knight takes a5, bishop to b5, knight c6, knight e5, and what and in many lines, black just gives up the pawn there. Bishop b5, queen takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, knight takes. Here, white's up about 2/10 of a pawn or so. Knight to e5, rook to c8, f3. It's about equal. Castles, knight takes, pawn takes, b4. Yeah, I guess I would say this is an error. Bishop to e5. Okay, so basically black's attacking here. So in terms of what to do, should white play rook to e1? Big picture, yes. I mean, this is the most. So f5 creates a big vulnerability with this, with this f5 move. Bishop to e5 allows knight to d7, and then this bishop has to be traded for that knight. So that's not ideal. You want to keep the bishop pair on as white. And for that reason, the engine's pointing. So realistically, I probably would have played bishop to e5 here. I think, or maybe even king to f1. What's so bad about king to f1? I actually sort of like king to f1. So, basically keeping the bishop pair on the board is going to be, this game is rapidly becoming a more open game. So, yeah, with this, these more aggressive tacks on the e file, this kind of thing, I think that white's going to end up in a situation where, where basically he's going to have open files, lines for attack, pretty strong for white. So that's what I'm saying. I guess overall here, so pawn takes, fc3, bishop b5, and yeah, white's going to be exerting pressure on c6, I think. Knight takes, pawn takes, b4, bishop, knight d7. And yeah, I think overall here, white's position is solid. Black's going to start making counterplay on the king side, bishop g3, and bishop to e5. Knight d7, rook to e1, rook takes, rook to f6, rook e1. Cool. So yeah, I guess overall here, I think this is, this is a reasonable way for white to play this. Not as favorable as keeping the bishop pair on the board. So I guess overall, Brendan, I would say, we've looked at this for a good amount, but I think that basically the lines that keep the bishop pair on the board, this position is rapidly becoming more open. Basically this bishop facing from e5 to h8, that's a big deal, I think. And the fact that this is playable, I think, is good for white. But I think that it can't be played immediately. So I think in order to make sure that this becomes available to be played later, white might be able to play things like h4, and then f4 potentially. H rook to e1. This looks good. This rook on e1 is facing off against e6. But yeah, I think that's slightly better. You want to keep the bishop pair on the board if possible. So that's sort of the first takeaway. I think overall this game has been solid. I don't really want to nitpick on this queen a5, bishop to b5, because I think we saw the tactic. So this tactic here, I don't know, because I'm sort of like, I don't really understand the engines line here completely. I play knight to e5, black plays rook to c8. So this is on queen takes a5, bishop takes, knight to e5. I don't understand a6 particularly. I feel like rook to c8 makes more sense here. Rook to c8 and then, okay, f3, bishop to f5, g4. But you've sort of shifted the whole gears here. The issue is, black. It's very computer-like for the basically the line that the engine thinks is the best here is just a6, ignoring the threat entirely, which I think is kind of crazy. So this seems to be the objectively best play for black, but I'm not really sold on it. So instead, bishop takes, knight takes, I guess is objectively the best play for black. But I guess I would say that basically rook to c8 here makes much more sense. Rook to c8, knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, bishop to a4, or I guess bishop to a6 is better than bishop to a4. This is kind of what I would expect out of this situation. So queen takes a5, knight takes a5, bishop to b5. A6 is sort of weird, so I don't really completely get that line. I guess we could go further into it, or why we wouldn't play rook to c8, but rook to c8, f3, bishop to f5. Sorry, I'm getting sort of stuck on this. Now I'm just looking at it. Bishop to f5, g4, bishop g6, h4, h5, knight to b3. Okay. I think white's pretty comfortable here. Threats on c6 seem big. Bishop h7, king e2. Yeah, to me this is, I guess this does look good, but I don't really understand the point of h3 g4. Couldn't you just do this immediately? Or f3 g4? Couldn't you just play knight to b3 immediately? Knight to b3, bishop to f5, knight to c6, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, that offered a slight improvement, I guess, according to the engine. So I don't really want to get stuck on looking at that for too much longer. So I just wanted to think about that for a bit. Anyways, bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, knight e5. All this makes sense to me. Bishop to e5 was an error. So you want to keep the bishop pair on the board. So I don't want to fixate too much on the previous thing, but I think that basically keeping the bishop pair on the board is better for white. Things like h4 probably are good. Things like bishop to e5 lose the bishop for the knight. I was also looking at king to f1. I think king to f1 is listed as inaccurate, but makes sense. Bishop to f2, bishop to e1, rook to e1. All of this is fine. So bishop to e5. This basically trades off the bishop pair. So I think that was a positional error that I think you could improve on. Knight takes e5, rook takes e5, rook to f6, rook to e1. Overall here, white's going to end up in a better, black's going to end up in a slightly better situation. It's pretty much equal. c5 is an error. Bishop takes d5. Interesting. Yeah, bishop takes d5 allows this threat on e7. And yeah, so once this game, kind of gets into the tactical situation, bishop takes d5. Yeah, so bishop takes d5, I think, is the move here. So bishop takes d5, and you're up by a pawn and a half. A lot of pressure on e6. E6 is probably going to fall as well. Clearly e6 is gonna fall, gonna collapse, and yeah, so threats on e6 I think are big here. C5, pawn takes c5, bishop takes c5, pawn takes, rook takes, and overall white's making the most of it. But that was the tactic. That is I don't like focusing on tactics, but bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, rook takes e7. Or if bishop to d6, rook takes e6. And black's just situation completely collapses. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, rook threats on e6. Cool. D takes c5, bishop takes, pawn takes, and this is not as good, right? I mean, things, with that optimal tactic, white's position really, white was really playing for an edge. Here, I think it's more complicated. Now rook to d7, and rook to d7, check, king goes to e8, and white's up by about 7 pawns here. So overall, should be good, should be a win. It was a smart move of white to basically aim for... So here, rook to d3 is played. But basically, this is really the decisive move of the game. So yeah, so this I think is it. Rook to rook to b8, rook to d7, king to e8, and basically white is white is winning. So no, I don't think you. I mean, if you don't win this, then maybe. Okay, so that was the issue. So this was it. You found the key tactic. Black missed the key tactic. With rook to d3, white doesn't get into the position. White doesn't get the 7th. But with the rook playing to b8, which really is a legitimately large blunder, rook to d7, and then the king goes to the 8th rank, and then white's up by about 7 pawns here. So overall, this looks good. I don't think there's much in the way of improvement here, and maybe rook takes h7, but white is fine. Anyways, rook takes a7, and just keep the rook on the 7th rank, and maybe even move it to I don't know. I'm looking at rook to a7 here, but definitely see if you can keep it on the 7th. And if you trade a rook here, that's also good. So so yeah, probably rook to a7 here. Rook to b7, c7. And yeah, okay. So yeah, so there were some misplays here. So let's go front to back on this game. The first idea here, bishop to b5, bishop takes, knight takes, and yeah, knight to e5. So this tactic, the computer finds. I wouldn't have seen it probably, but the computer finds this this line, queen takes a5 immediately, bishop to b5, and pressure on c6. Computer finds that. It's pretty solid, and this I think leads to a larger advantage for white. That said, bishop to b5 is a completely understandable move, and with that, I think that yeah, bishop to e5 is a positional error. Instead, rook to e1, rook takes. This is about equal. But I think there was a positional error to give up your bishop pair here. I think a big improvement here was king to f1. And then there was the improvement that related to the tactics after c5. After c5, bishop takes d5 is the winning tactic here. So that's another move to look at. So far, in terms of things to think about, keeping the 2 bishops on the board is thought number 1, and then thought number 2 is improving this tactic here with bishop takes d5. And then the next things that go on, rook to d7, king to e8, rook takes a7, and basically white's better here. This should be better for white. White's up by about 7 pawns, 8 pawns. White's fine. c7 is an error. So maintaining the 7th rank here is really white's strategy to win. A6 looks good. I think a6 may win by force here, so that's probably it. a6, rook takes c6, pawn a7, and then regardless, white's going to be queening on the next move. So that's a big improvement for white, and that should win. So yeah, that's big, and this, I think, overall, I think basically white's in a good place. So I think that if without that error of giving up the 7th rank, white is completely fine. So after this, white, I think, should be able to walk in this win, keep the rook on the 7th. That's it. And yeah, I hope this is helpful. Thank you very much for sending the game in, Brendan. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I guess what I would say, in overall terms, the things to yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you always for sending material into the stream. It's always super helpful. Sometimes there's a lot of material, but yeah, please feel free to send in as many more games as you'd like. I'll try to get to them soon. I'm only gonna book until the end of June right now. Somehow we've managed to get ourselves to the position where we're actually where people, the thing is, I don't want to do more than 1 game per day per people. I think that's enough. 1 game per day should be enough. Following that 1 game per rule, we've actually reached the end of June for some people. So that's great to have that much demand. And yeah, please send in more games, Bryn, as we'll book them as soon as we can. And yeah, overall here, rook to d7. This wins on the 7th, and yeah, b7 or c7 is an error because it dislocates your rook. The forced win here was a6, a7, and there's nothing that black can really do about this. a6, c3. So yeah, white. In this line, black's not even really trying to get rid of the a6 pawn. Cool. So there are your improvements. Positionally, leave the bishop pair on the board. The position was kind of opening up and making that bishop more powerful. So that definitely is the first one. The second one was there was a tactical improvement relating to c5, and then the third one here, your best practical options were moving that a pawn forward to a6, and now you can basically aggressively attack and maintain your bishop maintain your rook on the 7th rank. Anyways, really interesting game. Thank you very much for sending it, Brandon. And yeah, please keep sending them. All right, so I want to just say before we sign off, I have a simul tomorrow. It's my first one done with the Chess Academy Discord. I'm pretty excited about it. It's a game in 90 simul tomorrow. It's game in 90 plus 60-second increment. At 3 p.m. EST. So yeah, so there's a simul tomorrow. This is at a special time. This is at a special, basically this is a good, this is a good time for people in Europe and the US. It's also a good time for me. I take this marketing class from University of Toronto, so I have that until 2 p.m. I couldn't do it any other time tomorrow. But yeah, I'm really excited. I hope you guys can join me for a game in 90 plus 60. I was shooting for 50 people. We'll see what happens. Yeah, no, I'm actually in New York, but I take a class from the University of Toronto, in digital marketing. So yeah, but yeah, anyways, yeah, so I take, yeah, because everything's remote, right? So I can take a class. There. But anyways, this simul is at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Really appreciate anyone who can make it. I'm sure I'll be talking about this a good amount tomorrow during the 8 a.m. stream. But that's our next stream. Next stream is at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. Look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all very much for sending in the games. And yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Thanks. I hope this is helpful. Next stream is at 8 a.m. Eastern in about 8.5 hours from now. All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye.